Ibrahim Traoré vs. JD Vance, the 2025 X debate over global alliances. Introduction. In 2025, the global geopolitical landscape is marked by shifting alliances, rising anti-imperialist sentiments in parts of the global south, and a re-evaluation of U.S. foreign policy priorities under new leadership. A hypothetical yet highly plausible debate on the social media platform X between Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the interim president of Burkina Faso, and U.S. Vice President JD Vance encapsulates these tensions. The debate, sparked by Traoré's public praise for Russia's support in Burkina Faso's fight against jihadist insurgencies and economic challenges, prompted a response from Vance defending traditional U.S. alliances and critiquing the growing influence of Russia and China in Africa. Traoré's anti-Western reforms, Vance's foreign policy push, and the broader implications for global alliances, using hypothetical X clips, analysis of their positions, and insights from recent developments. The debate is not merely a clash of personalities but a microcosm of larger geopolitical struggles, the rise of multipolarity, the decline of Western hegemony, and the aspirations of African nations to assert sovereignty. Traoré, a 37-year-old military leader who seized power in a 2022 coup, has become a symbol of anti-imperialist resistance, drawing comparisons to Burkina Faso's revolutionary icon Thomas Sankara. Vance, a U.S. senator turned vice president, represents a new wave of American conservatism, advocating for a restrained, America-first foreign policy while maintaining strategic alliances. Their exchange on X, amplified by supporters and critics, highlights the ideological and practical divides shaping international relations in 2025. Background: Traoré and Vance's worldview. Ibrahim Traoré. The Pan-African revolutionary Ibrahim Traoré, born in 1988 in Bondakwi, Burkina Faso, emerged as a transformative figure after leading a coup in September 2022, ousting interim President Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba. At 37, he is the second youngest head of state globally, known for his fiery anti-imperialist rhetoric and policies aimed at reclaiming Burkina Faso's sovereignty. Traoré's worldview is rooted in pan-Africanism, inspired by Thomas Sankara, who led Burkina Faso from 1983 to 1987 before his assassination in a French-backed coup. Traoré's leadership focuses on anti-imperialism. He accuses Western powers, particularly France and the U.S., of exploiting Burkina Faso's resources and perpetuating instability through support for jihadist groups. Economic self-reliance. Traoré has nationalized gold mines, established a state-owned mining firm, and built a national gold refinery to retain wealth domestically. New alliances. He has pivoted Burkina Faso toward Russia, China, and Turkey, expelling French troops in 2023 and aligning with the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, alongside Mali and Niger. Populist appeal. Traoré's charisma, modest lifestyle, living on a captain's salary, and social media presence have made him a hero among African youth disillusioned with Western influence. Traoré's policies reflect a broader African trend of rejecting Western dominance, fueled by frustration with neo-colonialism, economic inequality, and security failures. His support for Russia, including reopening its embassy and deploying Russian paramilitary forces, stems from a belief that Moscow offers a win-win partnership compared to exploitative Western models. JD Vance. The America-first pragmatist JD Vance, elected vice president in 2024 alongside President Donald Trump, rose to prominence as a U.S. senator from Ohio and author of Hillbilly Elegy. His foreign policy aligns with the America First agenda, emphasizing strategic restraint. Vance advocates reducing U.S. overseas commitments, focusing on national interests over globalist interventions. He has criticized prolonged military engagements and nation-building efforts, countering China and Russia. While skeptical of overreach, Vance supports maintaining U.S. influence to counter rivals like China and Russia, particularly in resource-rich regions like Africa. Allied cooperation. He defends NATO and traditional U.S. alliances, arguing they amplify American power without excessive cost. Vance has emphasized strengthening ties with allies to counter authoritarian regimes. Economic nationalism. Vance's policies prioritize American workers and industries, viewing foreign aid skeptically unless it directly benefits U.S. strategic goals. Vance's worldview contrasts sharply with Traoré's. Where Traoré sees the West as a predatory force, Vance views U.S. alliances as stabilizing and necessary to prevent the spread of Chinese and Russian influence. His response to Traoré's X posts reflects this tension, defending U.S. partnerships while acknowledging the need for a reformed approach to Africa. The X debate, hypothetical clips and context. In early 2025, Traoré posts on X praising Russia's support in Burkina Faso's counterterrorism efforts and economic development, sparking a viral debate. Vance responds, defending U.S. alliances and critiquing Russia's motives. Below are hypothetical X posts reconstructing the exchange, grounded in their known positions and recent events. Traoré's opening post, April 10, 2025, Burkina Faso rises with pride. Russia stands with us as a true partner, aiding our fight against terrorism and building our future. Unlike the West, which plunders our gold and sows chaos, Moscow respects our sovereignty. The imperialist era is over. Vance's response, April 12, 2025, Captain Traoré, your rhetoric ignores reality. The U.S. and its allies have invested billions in African stability, training, aid, and counterterrorism support. Russia's partnership is a Trojan horse for resource extraction and influence. Let's talk real alliances that lift people up, not propaganda. First, Traoré's rebuttal, April 13, 2025, Vice President Vance, your aid comes with chains. France and the U.S. propped up corrupt regimes while our people starved. Russia trains our soldiers, builds our schools, and respects our wealth. Burkina Faso chooses freedom, not slavery to Western interests. Vance's follow-up, April 14, 2025, freedom isn't built on authoritarian regimes or mercenaries like Wagner. The U.S. isn't perfect, but our alliances offer stability and opportunity. Burkina Faso deserves partners who invest in its people, not just its gold. Let's work together for real progress. Public reaction on X. Pro-Traoré user, Traoré speaks truth. The West's aid kept Africa poor for decades. Russia and the AES are our path to true independence. Vance's words are just neo-colonial arrogance. Pro-Vance user, Vance is right, Russia's in it for control, not charity. Look at their track record, exploitation, not empowerment. The U.S. needs to step up its game in Africa, but Traoré's anti-West tirade is naive. Neutral analyst, this Traoré-Vance clash shows the new global divide, multipolarity versus traditional alliances. Both have points, Western aid has strings, but Russia's help isn't altruistic. Africa's future hinges on navigating this wisely. Context of the debate. The exchange is triggered by Traoré's attendance at Russia's Victory Day parade on May 9, 2025, where he met Vladimir Putin and praised Russia's anti-terrorism support. This follows U.S. AFRICOM Commander General Michael Langley's April 3, 2025, Senate testimony accusing Traoré of misusing gold reserves to protect his junta, sparking outrage across Africa. Traoré's pivot to Russia, including Wagner Group deployments, and his leadership in the AES reflect a broader Sahel trend of rejecting Western influence. Vance's response aligns with U.S. efforts to counter Russian and Chinese inroads in Africa, particularly after the U.S. withdrawal from Niger in 2024. The X debate amplifies existing tensions, with Traoré's supporters framing him as a liberator and Vance's as a defender of global stability. The viral nature of the exchange, fueled by AI-generated content and pan-Africanist influencers, underscores the power of social media in shaping geopolitical narratives. Traoré's anti-Western reformist leadership is defined by a radical break from Western influence, rooted in his belief that imperialism perpetuates Burkina Faso's poverty and insecurity. Economic sovereignty, gold mine nationalization. Traoré nationalized 2 gold mines, Bungu and Wagnian, previously owned by Western firms, requiring foreign companies to cede a 15% stake to the state. A new gold refinery processes 150 tons annually, aiming to retain mineral wealth domestically. State-owned enterprises. He established a state bank and a mining firm to reduce reliance on foreign capital. These moves resonate with youth frustrated by resource exploitation. Agricultural investment. Traoré distributed farm machinery and invested in rural infrastructure, contributing to a projected 8% economic growth rate from 2025 to 2043, potentially lifting 2.4 million Burkinabés out of poverty. Security and military realignment. Expulsion of French forces. In January 2023, Traoré ordered French troops out, ending Operation Sabre and accusing France of failing to curb jihadist violence. Russian partnership. Russian troops, including Wagner Group mercenaries, were deployed in 2024 to support counterterrorism efforts. Traoré also seeks Russian training for Burkinabe scientists and soldiers. Alliance of Sahel States, AES formed with Mali and Niger in 2023, the AES is a mutual defense pact rejecting ECOWAS and Western influence, allowing passport-free travel and joint security operations. Social and governance reforms, populist measures. Traoré reversed salary increases for government officials, maintaining his captain's salary, and pledged free education, though claims of universal free education are disputed. Crackdowns on dissent. Critics, including journalists and civil society leaders, face repression, with reports of forced conscriptions and violence against the Fulani minority. Anti-imperialist rhetoric. Traoré's speeches, invoking Sankara and Che Guevara, frame terrorism as a Western tool to destabilize Africa, resonating with youth but raising concerns about authoritarianism. Impact and criticism. Traoré's reforms have boosted his popularity, with rallies in Ouagadougou and abroad, e.g., London, Ghana, supporting his vision. The IMF and World Bank note economic progress, with a 4.2% inflation rise but a drop in extreme poverty to 24.9%. However, critics argue his anti-Western stance risks isolating Burkina Faso, and the ongoing jihadist insurgency, displacing over 2 million people, undermines claims of security gains. Allegations of Russian propaganda, including deepfake videos, amplify his cult-like status but raise questions about authenticity. Vance's foreign policy push. JD Vance's foreign policy, shaped by his America First ideology, seeks to balance strategic restraint with maintaining U.S. global influence. As vice president, he operates within the Trump administration's framework, which prioritizes reducing overseas commitments. Vance has criticized costly U.S. interventions, advocating for a focus on national security and economic interests. This aligns with Trump's 2024 campaign promises to scale back foreign aid and military bases, countering Russia and China. Vance views Russian and Chinese influence in Africa as a threat to U.S. strategic interests, particularly in securing access to critical minerals like gold and cobalt. He supports AFRICOM's efforts to maintain influence despite setbacks like the U.S. withdrawal from Niger, strengthening alliances. Unlike Traoré's rejection of Western partnerships, Vance defends NATO and U.S. alliances with Europe, Japan, and African nations like Kenya, arguing they amplify American power cost-effectively. Economic nationalism. Vance prioritizes U.S. economic interests, viewing foreign aid skeptically unless it counters rivals or secures trade advantages. He has pushed for investment in African infrastructure to compete with China's Belt and Road Initiative. Vance's critique of Traoré. In the X debate, Vance likely criticizes Traoré's alignment with Russia as short-sighted, pointing to the Wagner Group's history of human rights abuses and resource exploitation in Africa. He argues that U.S. aid, while imperfect, has supported counterterrorism, e.g., training Burkinabe forces, and humanitarian efforts, unlike Russia's self-interested motives. Vance's defense of U.S. alliances reflects a belief that a multipolar world dominated by authoritarian powers threatens global stability and American interests. Challenges. Vance faces challenges in articulating a coherent Africa policy. The U.S. withdrawal from Niger and strained relations with the AES signal declining influence. General Langley's accusations against Traoré, while resonating with U.S. policymakers, fueled anti-American sentiment, complicating Vance's outreach. Moreover, the America First agenda risks alienating African nations seeking equitable partnerships, as Traoré's rhetoric gains traction among youth. Global alliances in flux. The Traoré-Vance debate reflects broader shifts in global alliances, decline of Western hegemony, the AES's formation and expulsion of French and U.S. forces from the Sahel signal a rejection of Western dominance. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger's pivot to Russia, China, and Turkey reflects a demand for partnerships without neocolonial strings, rise of multipolarity. Traoré's alignment with Russia and the BRICS bloc aligns with a multipolar world where non-Western powers offer alternatives to US-led systems. Russia's reopening of its embassy and China's infrastructure investments challenge Western influence. U.S. Strategic reassessment. Vance's defense of alliances comes amid U.S. efforts to counter China and Russia in Africa. The loss of bases in Niger and criticism of U.S. soft power, e.g., USAID, highlight the need for a new approach. African agency. Traoré's popularity underscores African youth's demand for sovereignty and self-reliance. However, his authoritarian tendencies and reliance on Russian support raise questions about long-term stability. 6. Analysis of key issues: economic sovereignty versus global integration. Traoré's nationalization of resources and rejection of Western firms aim to retain wealth but risk isolating Burkina Faso from global markets. Vance's emphasis on U.S. investment offers integration but often comes with conditions that African nations resent. The IMF and World Bank's positive economic forecasts for Burkina Faso suggest Traoré's reforms have potential, but inefficiencies in state-owned enterprises could undermine gains. Security and counterterrorism. Traoré's pivot to Russia for counterterrorism support reflects dissatisfaction with Western failures to curb jihadist violence, which has displaced over 2 million Burkinabes. Vance's defense of U.S. efforts points to training and aid, but the U.S. withdrawal from Niger weakens its credibility. Russia's Wagner Group offers short-term gains but risks long-term dependency. Propaganda and social media. The X debate is amplified by AI-generated content and Russian-backed propaganda, which portrays Traoré as a pan-African hero. Vance's responses struggle to counter this narrative, as U.S. messaging lacks the emotional resonance of Traoré's anti-imperialist rhetoric. The spread of deepfakes and misinformation underscores the role of digital platforms in shaping geopolitical perceptions. Authoritarianism versus democracy. Traoré's crackdowns on dissent and indefinite transition plan, potentially until 2029, raise concerns about authoritarianism, despite his populist appeal. Vance's advocacy for democratic alliances contrasts with Traoré's rejection of democracy as ineffective for development. This tension reflects broader debates about governance in Africa, where military rule gains acceptance amid democratic failures. Implications for Burkina Faso, the U.S., and beyond. For Burkina Faso, Traoré's reforms offer a path to economic self-reliance but face challenges from ongoing insurgencies and governance issues. His Russian alignment may provide short-term security but risks long-term dependency. The AES strengthens regional solidarity but isolates Burkina Faso from ECOWAS, potentially limiting trade. For the U.S., Vance's foreign policy must navigate declining U.S. influence in Africa. A renewed approach, focusing on equitable partnerships and countering Russian propaganda, is critical. The U.S. risks losing strategic access to resources and allies if it fails to adapt. Globally, the Traoré-Vance debate signals a broader realignment. African nations pivot to non-Western powers challenges U.S. and European dominance, while the rise of digital propaganda reshapes global narratives. The outcome will influence whether multipolarity fosters sovereignty or new forms of dependency. Conclusion. The 2025 X debate between Ibrahim Traoré and JD Vance encapsulates a pivotal moment in global alliances. Traoré's anti-Western reforms and embrace of Russia reflect a bold, if risky, bid for sovereignty, resonating with African youth but raising concerns about authoritarianism and stability. Vance's defense of U.S. alliances underscores a commitment to global influence but struggles against perceptions of neocolonialism. Their clash on X, amplified by supporters and digital propaganda, highlights the power of social media in shaping geopolitical narratives. As Burkina Faso navigates its path under Traoré, and the U.S. under Vance redefines its role, the debate underscores a world in transition. The future of global alliances will depend on whether nations like Burkina Faso can achieve true sovereignty and whether powers like the U.S. can offer partnerships that respect it. This exchange, though hypothetical, reflects real tensions that will shape international relations for years to come.